Welcome back to the Deep Dive. Today we're tackling a massive question. It really sits at this crossroads of Silicon Valley tech and almost constitutional thinking. As AI starts managing not just cars, but whole corporations, how on earth do we regulate that?
It's a huge challenge. And, our sources really point out that the whole legal system is kind of creaking under the pressure here.
Right.
Historically, laws were written by people, enforced by people. They assumed human judgment, interpretation, all that fuzzy stuff. But now we're looking at a future where machines will actually execute the law, making critical business decisions.
And that's the core problem, isn't it? We humans are okay with vagueness. We use context, common sense.
Exactly.
But algorithms, they need absolute mathematical precision.
Yeah.
Our laws, frankly, they're just not written that way, not even close.
The level of wording precision people accept is just way lower than what an AI needs. It forces a pretty fundamental shift.
It really does.
And this isn't entirely new. People have dreamed of, removing humans from the legal loop for ages. Leibniz talked about universal mathematics centuries ago.
Right. The idea of computing the law.
Yeah, and more recently, you have figures like Stephen Wolfram pushing for computational law where, contracts basically become algorithms.
Sounds amazing in theory. A legal system where answers are calculated, not argued over for years. But, well, we're not there yet. We have these fuzzy human laws now.
We do.
So how do we bridge that gap when an AI is potentially running a huge company?
That's really the focus of this deep dive. The sources we're looking at propose a specific solution. They call it a dedicated operational context, or DOC.
The DOC, okay.
Think of it like an AI constitution for these autonomous management systems. We need to figure out the practical nuts and bolts legal foundations for these things to even work safely and legally.
An AI constitution. Let's unpack that. Where do we start?
Well, to get our heads around this DOC for a corporation, it actually helps to look at something we do regulate quite well already in the autonomous world, the ODD.
The ODD, that's the operational design domain
Yeah.
used for self-driving cars, right?
Exactly that. SAE, the Society of Automotive Engineers, defines it. It's basically the specific set of conditions, weather, time of day, road types, maybe geography, where an autonomous driving system is designed to operate safely.
Makes sense. You need to know its limits.
Without knowing the ODD, you can't guarantee performance or safety. It defines the boundaries.
Okay, so for a car, it's physical conditions.
Yeah.
Rain, snow, highways. But what about an AI running a company? What are its operational conditions? It's not worried about weather.
Right. For an AI corporate manager, a huge chunk of that operational context is the regulatory and legal environment it has to operate within.
Ah, okay. And that environment, as we said, is currently full of these human-centric rules.
Precisely. And that causes friction. One source mentions the European Commission looking at this with automated systems, like cars again. They found these systems often just can't follow human rules exactly.
So what were the options?
Well, the EC laid out basically three pretty unappealing choices. One, change the human rules to fit the machines. Two, just let the systems break the rules sometimes. Or three, force the system to hand control back to a person.
Yikes. And none of those really work for, say, an AI managing a global supply chain or a hedge fund.
Not really. Change the laws. You might mess things up for humans. Let the AI disobey. Chaos. Hand back control. You lose the whole point of autonomy. It's an impasse.
So what's the proposed way out? This is where the DOC comes in.
This leads to the core idea, dual wording, creating sort of parallel rule sets.
Dual wording. Explain that.
The practical proposal is that internal policies, regulations, codes of conduct, all that stuff needs to be written and exist simultaneously in two versions.
Two versions of the same rule.
Yeah. One version written for people, using natural language, considering human understanding, and another version written specifically for the AI system, likely more formalized, maybe even code-like.
Hold on. Isn't that just creating twice the work? And what if the human version says one thing and the machine version says something slightly different because of the precision needed? Sounds like a recipe for confusion. Or worse, legal loopholes.
That's a fair question and a potential pitfall for sure. The goal isn't to create contradictory rules, but to recognize they're serving different users, different interpreters.
Okay.
The sources draw an analogy here saying we actually already do this kind of thing. Think about bilingual contracts in international business.
Like a China-U.S. joint venture agreement, maybe?
Exactly like that. Often you'll have one agreement, but with two official texts, one in Chinese, one in English. Both are legally binding.
Right, because the language and even the legal context might require slightly different phrasing to achieve the same intent for both parties.
Precisely. The spirit is the same, But the execution, the operational context for understanding and applying it, differs. One text is optimized for human readers and lawyers in one legal system, the other for those in another.
Ah, I get the parallel now. So one text is optimized for human managers, boards, employees, and the other is optimized for the AI's algorithmic processing.
You got it. This dual approach gives the AI that clearly defined operational context its rails, allowing it to function predictably and meet standards, without making humans talk like computers or forcing the AI to guess the meaning of ambiguous prose.
Okay, that makes more sense. So this AI constitution, this DOC, needs a solid foundation. Where do we get the core principles?
The suggestion from the source material is not to reinvent the wheel entirely. Use established frameworks like the G20 OECD Principles of Corporate Governance. These are broadly accepted standards for how companies should behave.
Okay, so take those human-centric principles.
And then translate them.
Yeah.
Translate those ethical standards into specific, measurable, AI-friendly metrics for that second machine-readable version of the rules.
Let's walk through an example. How would you translate something like informed consent? That's already tricky with humans and privacy policies.
It is. For humans, informed consent is about making sure people actually understand what they're agreeing to, moving past just clicking "I agree" on page 50 of Terms and Conditions.
And we've seen where ambiguity leads.
Mm.
The source brings up things like the debates around Tesla's autopilot where beta testers really fully informed that, failure could mean death.
Exactly. That kind of high-stakes situation shows why the AI's policy can't afford to be vague. The AI formalization of informed consent has to be concrete.
So the human version might explain the risks in plain language.
Right, focusing on the user's mindset, their understanding. But the AI version, the one in the DOC, needs to be based on metrics. It has to specify exactly how the AI is programmed to act in normal situations versus critical ones, what data triggers different responses, and precisely what information it must communicate back to the user and when.
So it becomes auditable. You can check if the AI followed its own precise rules.
Okay, what about non-discrimination? Huge issue with AI bias already.
A massive one.
Yeah.
And here, the source highlights something really interesting, almost counterintuitive.
Mm.
When we humans try to test AI for bias, we naturally tend to use human social categories. Race, religion, sex, age, that sort of thing. You see this in things like the MIT Moral Machine Experiment, asking people to make choices based on these classifications.
Yeah, choose who the self-driving car hits.
Right. But think about it. For a purely mathematical AI, concepts like race or religion are just, they're abstract labels people use. They don't inherently mean anything to the algorithm itself.
The math doesn't see race, it just sees data points that might correlate with it.
Exactly. So trying to judge the AI directly on those human categories can be misleading or insufficient. The AI constitution needs a different approach.
Which is the non-discrimination policy for the AI must specify mathematically verifiable criteria. It needs tests focused on the algorithmic outcomes. Things like the equitable distribution of risk or access or resources across different input data patterns. Things the AI can actually process and be measured against.
So instead of asking, is this AI biased against women?
Yeah.
You design tests to see if its risk scoring, for example, disproportionately affects input profiles that happen to correlate strongly with being female, ensuring the algorithm itself is balanced in its outputs.
Precisely. It's a subtle but crucial shift in perspective, focusing on the algorithmic behavior, not just applying human social labels after the fact.
That's a big conceptual jump.
Okay.
Okay, one more principle. Monitoring and awareness. The board's job is to watch management. How does that translate?
Well, here, AI offers a potential game changer. Continuous monitoring. Humans check in periodically. An AI manager can be aware of relevant data flows constantly.
This sounds like that old idea of continuous auditing.
It's very related. That concept popped up back in the early 90s at AT&T Bell Labs. Even then, they knew it wasn't just a tech upgrade. It needed big changes in how things operated, the whole context.
So if continuous auditing was radical then, maybe continuous awareness is just the baseline expectation for an AI director now.
That's the idea. And awareness for an AI needs to be formalized in its constitution. It's not a gut feeling.
Right.
It means defining a specific required list of data sources, financials, supply chains, market data, whatever is critical, and setting the mandatory frequency for updating that data and the algorithms using it. The corporate policies must list these specifics. It ensures the AI isn't flying blind or using stale information.
Okay, so we've defined the rules, the Constitution. Now we need the director itself.
Yeah.
How do you even appoint an AI to the management team? We judge humans on knowledge, competence, experience.
And right now, as you can imagine, the trust level for AI doing complex, nuanced work is, well, it's pretty low in many areas.
Yeah, the sources mention big banks banning tools like ChatGPT for actual business use because of worries about inaccuracy, legal issues. If you can't trust it for an email draft, how do you trust it with strategy?
That trust gap makes formalizing competence absolutely essential. The AI Constitution, the DOC, has to spell out the parameters for selecting the AI system. What specific tests or exams must it pass? How do we measure its capabilities against the company's actual goals? That's how you define its competence and experience in algorithmic terms.
And keeping competent. Humans go to training courses, stay updated. What's the AI equivalent for performance evaluation?
An AI doesn't need a seminar on fiduciary duty, but it absolutely needs regular, systematic updates.
Right.
Data, algorithms, underlying models, they all need refreshing.
So if a human director could be negligent for not keeping up with new regulations.
An AI system could be considered negligent if it's operating on critically outdated data or a flawed algorithm that hasn't been updated as required by its own defined policy.
So the policy has to mandate the how often, what sources, what scope for these updates. It's like its continuous professional development program.
Exactly. And then there's cooperation and communication. This changes radically, too. Humans work, 9 to 5, maybe longer, but there's a rhythm based on human capacity.
An AI director.
Yeah.
It's potentially working 24/7, 365. The whole concept of scheduling meetings or waiting for reports changes.
Completely. Interaction shifts from human-to-human scheduling to human-to-interface engagement.
You're talking to a system, not a person.
Right. Communication with the AI director, whether it's other board members, employees, or even shareholders, will happen through digital interfaces, maybe advanced chatbots, data dashboards, maybe even visual holograms or VRR interfaces down the line.
So the AI Constitution needs to define what those communication standards and required interfaces are.
Yes, ensuring there's always clear, potentially instantaneous access to its reasoning and decisions in a way humans can understand. It feels like humans will need to adapt to the AI's optimal, always-on style more than the other way around.
It certainly flips the script. So wrapping this all together, this idea of an AI constitution.
It really brings us back to a fundamental choice for lawmakers, and the source material uses a great analogy for this. It asks, should we treat these powerful autonomous systems like a car, or like a train, a plane, or maybe even a rocket?
The difference being?
Dedicated infrastructure. Cars mostly use public roads, adapting to the existing, somewhat chaotic environment. But trains, planes, rockets, they require carefully designed, controlled environments. Railways, air corridors, launch protocols, specialized terminal.
Right. Highly regulated, dedicated spaces.
And look at the safety data for transport. Despite being incredibly powerful machines, planes and trains are statistically much safer than cars. Why? Largely because they operate within that controlled, dedicated infrastructure.
So the argument is, for corporate AI, for maximum safety, reliability, and efficiency, you can't just let the AI CEO loose on the public highway of our current ambiguous human legal system.
Exactly. You need that dedicated legal context, the AI Constitution, the DOC, to act as the railway tracks, the air traffic control for the autonomous system.
That infrastructure is what makes the whole thing work predictably and safely, allowing humans and AI to collaborate effectively.
That's the conclusion from the analysis. But then, this leads to a really provocative final thought they raise.
Go on.
Imagine we get really good at writing these super precise, metric-based policies for AIs, rules that are unambiguous, verifiable, maybe even provably fair according to their own internal logic. What happens if those rules start looking, well, better than the ones we have for ourselves?
Maybe because they're clearer, more predictable, less open to endless interpretation and argument.
Perhaps. If the laws we painstakingly craft for machines, laws designed to eliminate ambiguity because machines can't handle it, end up being objectively clearer, maybe even fairer in their application than the laws we wrote for humans. What does that tell us? Does it suggest where our own legal system might eventually need to go? Will we start demanding the kind of precision from our own laws that we first developed for our algorithms?
That's quite a thought. Writing the clearest laws in history. Initially, not even for ourselves, but for the AIs we're building. A slightly humbling prospect for human legal tradition.
It definitely gives you something to think about.
It certainly does. Well, that's all the time we have for this deep dive. Thank you for joining us.